So what is the size of the opportunity here?
So I can talk about him being a partner of this because he's like an early advisor and then ended up doing some investment as well. But we have a really old school Bitcoin miner who's been helping us figure things out. That's Marshall out of
Marshall Long.
Texas. Yeah, Marshall Long. He works with Rhodium, and he knows more about this space than almost anybody, at least that we've met. And he's been super helpful in figuring out things. And so he came and visited with us in, I think, October. And he looked around and he said, I think Africa might be the next big home of Bitcoin mining. And the reason why is because you don't have a grid. That actually makes it really valuable for Bitcoin miners because you can come in and you can do deals that would be very difficult to do elsewhere. And it's not seen as kind of turning the screws on somebody. It's seen as a, thank God you're here to help me. So when we go and talk to an energy provider, an energy developer, so we have, and let me give you some finite examples. So we went and talked to a solar farm that had built 94 megawatts of solar. They had been able to sell 80 megawatts of it to the grid. They have 14 megawatts that are just sitting there stranded. So they had never heard of Bitcoin, never thought of Bitcoin mining, any of that stuff. So we went there and we spent the first hour just explaining what Bitcoin is, what Bitcoin mining is, how the Bitcoin network works, this global, this global network of computers and hash power. And then at the end of it, they said, "So how much are you going to pay for the power?" We said, "We're not going to pay you anything." And they said, "Well, we need to be paid, X amount for this power." We said, "Well, here's the deal: you're not selling that power to anybody. But I tell you what we'll do: we'll give you 30% of the revenue. We'll give you 30% of the Bitcoin that's mined every minute of every day." And they sat there and thought about it. They're like, "Okay." And we went around and saw everything for the next hour. And we came back and said, "Well, how much are you going to pay?" We was like, "We're not going to pay. You're going to get 30% revenue share on this Bitcoin." And they're like, "I know, but," and we're like, "You're not getting anything else. There's nobody else to sell this power to." They're like, "Okay, you're right. And let's start with 2 megawatts. Let's see what we can do." So that's the kind of thing that happens here. And I think that's why Marshall and others see the advantage. Like there's not only the larger power generation, renewable power generation sites that are like them. And hydro is the same. Hydro has massive amounts of stranded energy. Like in East Africa alone, there's over 200 megawatts of just stranded energy in I think actually in just Kenya alone, there's 200 megawatts of just stranded energy. And that's mostly hydro, some solar. And you look at that, you're like, wow, that's a big opportunity. And then you turn over here and you say the mini grids have the same problem at a smaller scale. Our business has been built around saying, hey, we want to do instead of just kind of vertical growth where we go to big mining sites and we build another just big data center, we want to build laterally. We want to build horizontally where we have many small sites and maybe a couple larger ones, right, in the future. But we think that's where growth and decentralization and security of the network comes from.
And there's an additional benefit here because you could have turned around to them and said, "Yeah, we'll pay you X cents on the dollar for your power," and they would have just issued you an invoice. You'd have paid them, but you've kind of forced them to learn a little bit about Bitcoin now. And they're people who work in this sector. They're going to tell other people who work in this sector about what they're doing. So you help spread the knowledge and understanding of Bitcoin as well.
Yeah, we do. We think we have a pretty nice pole position in the space. But you talk about sharing, right? I'm wearing the Gamma shirt. Gamma is the Green Africa Mining Alliance, right? It's just an association of other renewable energy based Bitcoin miners in Africa. And there's only 5 of us right now. But the idea is like, how can we share this knowledge so it can be done by more people? Gridless alone can't take advantage of all the opportunities that are just in East Africa. So why would we try and take that knowledge and just own it ourselves? We should share this. We should share the methodologies. We should share the blueprints for how to do this. And we should also share some data with each other and maybe with the regulators who are going to come along behind us and try and make laws around this so that it opens it up to more people, more Bitcoin is being mined on the continent. More companies are being developed around it, some small, some large. No doubt some will be even larger than us. And but it also opens it up to the energy guys in a way that they've never had it before. And I think that's what gets exciting when you can take. And just so you know the numbers, there's 600 million people in Africa that don't have access to electricity. That's a lot, right? That's 2/3 of the world's total that don't have access to electricity. That's here. And so what we all should be trying to do is focus on how can we help electricity proliferate across this continent. Bitcoin mining just happens to be the missing link that allows that to happen. And so it ends up being good business for us, but also ends up being good for the rest of society.
And Erik, would you say it's fair to say that whilst you're an entrepreneur, and you've clearly had a successful career, this is part mission driven?
You know, yeah, I just have always been, if you're going to spend your life doing something, build something that makes the world a better place, makes it more meaningful. I think that's where I sit. Um, there's you can build all kinds of things, you can make all kinds of money, you can build small things and you can build large things. But whatever you try and do, and whatever I try and do, let me say, is try and build something that does help, proliferate a better human condition. And and yes, you should make money at the same time, because I grew up here and I've seen the damage that NGOs and government can do. And so I think if you actually want to make change happen in Africa, then you build businesses, you grow wealth. And I think business is the right vector for that.
So I asked the question for a reason, because as a Bitcoiner, I'm a Bitcoiner, Danny's a Bitcoiner, you're a Bitcoiner. When we travel to, say, a Bitcoin meetup, we spend most of our time just talking about ideas and opportunities and what people are working on. But then outside of that, we also have to interact with the non-Bitcoin world, which can be very challenging. We have people who are very critical of Bitcoin, people who spread misinformation, risk of regulation. We have all these external forces working against us. Yet they don't really understand. I think sometimes it comes from a place of privilege. There's one guy, I can't remember his name, but he's a very critical, he's quite a big critic of Bitcoin. He lives in Berkeley and in San Francisco. He lives a very privileged life. And I don't think he realizes the consequences of what he's trying to stop in places like Africa. He has electricity. He doesn't, well, he's in California, might have blackouts, but he doesn't have the kind of issues that people in Africa are dealing with. And from his privileged position, he's working against a technology which supports, the human flourishing.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you have is people. There's a lot of people with blinders on who live in the West because they can't see beyond what happens to them every day. And there are challenges. I mean, that's not, there's people who have real issues in the U.S. and Europe and places like that. But you know, when you're super focused on your own view of the world, I think what happens is you don't see what's going on elsewhere, and the damage that you can do on a kind of a macro scale around it, because you're so focused on yourself. And for that reason, I think you need more people to travel. You need more people to see, and it's when those experiences are had that you change your worldview. Like before you started traveling internationally, I bet you had a very different worldview than you do today. And a lot of these people haven't traveled enough, or when they do, they're in a very controlled environment that doesn't allow them to actually see what the everyman does, and the everyman has to deal with.
Well, I think gridless might become one of those things that I end up mentioning quite a bit on the show or on Twitter, or when I'm with somebody who's very critical of Bitcoin, and to say, look, you really need to understand in what this innovation is doing in different parts of the world. We've had different case studies like the Belarus protests against Lukashenko or the protests in Nigeria. But now what we have is another opportunity, which is creating economic opportunity. So don't be surprised if this becomes one of my case studies.
Alex Gladstein and I have known each other a long time because of Ushahidi and the Human Rights Foundation. And so we were both at a conference recently, and some of my old friends were there too, and very academic, very anti-Bitcoin. It's what I came to find out. And they said something. I remember sitting at the table and they said, "Well, I'm just sad to see that you're doing this now, Erik." Right? I'm like, wait a second. Well, hold on a second. what do you not like about it? And then, it's this, oh, well, Bitcoin uses so much energy. It's not good for the planet. And I said, well, let me see if I can change your mind, right, on that, and start talking about it. And it's very easy to be anti-Bitcoin when you're sitting in a comfy house in a nice situation somewhere in U.S. or Europe. But when you actually see the change and the ability for somebody to do their homework at night, maybe cool their food for the first time ever, charge their phone and be able to be in communication, you can't tell me that your comfort and even though we all know the numbers are wrong, but you can't tell me that your theory on what is good for you in that situation is better. It's more important than it is for that kid or that family living in rural Africa. And I think that's what people forget.